My son stole my life savings and laughed about it. So I bought the company he works for and fired him publicly. I opened my bank account to see a zero balance. My life savings gone. 43 years of careful saving. Every penny I'd put away for retirement, for emergencies, for the future Mabel and I had planned before cancer took her last year. All of it vanished. My son Spencer stood in my living room, hands in his pockets, that familiar smirk spreading across his face. The same expression he'd worn as a teenager when he thought he was cleverer than everyone else. "Face it, old man," he said, shrugging like we were discussing the weather. "You got scammed. Online dating at your age? Seriously? What did you expect?" Then he laughed. Not a nervous chuckle or an uncomfortable giggle. A full, cruel, belly laugh that echoed through the house where Mabel and I had raised him, where we'd celebrated his birthdays, helped with homework, and dreamed of the man he'd become. The sound cut through me like a knife. This wasn't my son anymore. This was a stranger wearing his face, mocking the man who'd sacrificed everything to give him a good life. I stood there in stunned silence, watching him laugh at my pain, my confusion, my complete devastation. At that moment, something inside me died. But something else was born. Just before you continue to watch, Joe would like you to subscribe to this channel and like this video. It would encourage him to keep his streak of thrilling revenge stories for you to watch. Alright, back to the story. Within a week, the story spread through our small town like wildfire. Spencer had crafted it perfectly, telling everyone who would listen about his poor, lonely father who'd been duped by some internet scammer. "Yeah, Dad got catfished," he told Mrs. Olivia at the grocery store, shaking his head sadly. "Some woman named Maria from Miami said she loved him, needed money for a plane ticket to visit. He wired everything." I tried to warn him, but you know how stubborn old folks get about romance. The story had everything people wanted to believe. A grieving widower, desperate for love, falling for an obvious scam. It explained the missing money, made Spencer look like the caring son who tried to protect his foolish father, and gave everyone permission to feel sorry for me instead of suspicious. My barber clicked her tongue sympathetically. These online predators target lonely seniors. Terrible shame. My neighbor brought me casseroles and spoke in that gentle voice people use with the mentally fragile. Even my old work friends called, offering awkward comfort about learning to be more careful with technology. Only Spencer and I knew the truth. Only we knew who really took that money. I stayed silent through it all. Every whisper behind my back, every pitying glance, every well-meaning lecture about internet safety, I absorbed it like a sponge soaks up water. The shame burned in my chest, but I never corrected the story, never defended myself, never told anyone what really happened. People probably thought the embarrassment had broken me, that I was just another sad old man, shuffling through his remaining years in quiet defeat. They saw me at the bank, cashing my small Social Security check. They watched me clip coupons at the grocery store. They nodded sympathetically when I walked past. But inside, I wasn't just hurt. I wasn't just devastated by my son's betrayal. I was planning. Every sleepless night, every quiet morning, every long afternoon, I used that time to think, to plan, to remember everything Spencer had told me about his job, his boss, his company, to recall every detail about how he'd accessed my accounts, every lie he'd told, every moment of his cruel laughter. The town saw a broken man. Spencer saw a defeated father. But they were both wrong. I was gathering strength like a storm gathers clouds. I sat in Mabel's chair that evening, her framed photograph in my hands. The picture showed her at our 25th anniversary dinner, her eyes bright with laughter, her face glowing with the happiness we'd shared for decades. "He stole everything we saved, Mabel," I whispered to her image. "Every penny we put away for our golden years. Every dollar we sacrificed to give him a better life. But he won't steal my dignity." I traced her face with my finger, remembering how she'd worried about Spencer in those final weeks. "He's different now, Henry," she'd said, her voice weak but concerned. "There's something cold in his eyes. Promise me you'll be careful." I should have listened. Should have seen the signs. The expensive clothes he wore despite his modest salary. The way he'd started asking about our finances, our retirement accounts, our plans for the money. Instead, I trusted him completely. Given him power of attorney when Mabel got sick, thinking it would help him take care of us both. He'd used that trust to drain every account, liquidate every investment, steal every cent we'd worked for. But looking at Mabel's picture, I made a promise. Not for revenge. Revenge was too small. For justice. For the man she'd married. For the future we'd planned. The next morning, I walked into First National Bank with nothing but a business plan and desperation. I'd spent 3 weeks researching, planning, writing proposals. My hands shook as I sat across from the loan officer. "Mr. Guerrero, I'll be honest," she said, flipping through my application. "At your age, with your current financial situation, this is extremely risky. You're asking for $50,000 with essentially no collateral." I leaned forward. "I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for a chance. I have 40 years of engineering experience. I understand technology. I see an opportunity in the market." She frowned at my credit report. "But you just lost your life savings to an internet scam." That suggests I learned an expensive lesson about trust," I interrupted. "But it doesn't change what I know about business." She studied my face for a long moment, then looked at my plan again. The technical consulting service I wanted to start. The clients I'd already contacted. The research I'd done. "It's risky," she repeated. I signed the papers anyway. I had nothing left to lose. I spent the next year living like a monk and working like a machine. Every morning at 5 a.m., I was at my kitchen table with coffee and my laptop, teaching myself modern business practices, digital marketing, current technology trends. During the day, I contacted every engineering firm within 100 miles, offering my services as a consultant. 40 years of experience, I told them. Reasonable rates. Reliable work. Evenings were for accounting, legal research, business development. I watched YouTube tutorials until my eyes burned. Read industry magazines until the words blurred together. Made cold calls until my voice was hoarse. My body ached from sitting hunched over the computer. My back protested the long hours. My eyes watered from staring at screens. But my mind grew sharper every day. Spencer never called to check on me. Never asked how I was managing. The few times we crossed paths in town, he barely acknowledged me. Just a quick nod before looking away, probably embarrassed by his foolish father. He had no idea that the foolish old man was learning to be dangerous. After a year, my small tech consulting service turned its first real profit. Not much, just enough to pay back part of the loan and cover my basic expenses. But it felt like winning the lottery. I stared at the bank statement showing a positive balance, remembering how it felt to see zeros where my life savings used to be. This money was different. This money I'd earned myself, built from nothing, created through pure determination. My first major contract came from a construction company that needed help modernizing their project management systems. Work I could do in my sleep, but they were grateful and paid well. Word spread. Other companies called. My reputation grew. I kept my expenses minimal, same small house, same old car, same simple lifestyle. But every dollar I earned beyond basic survival went into a separate account. A war chest. The money came slowly at first, then faster as my client list expanded. Regional contracts. Bigger projects. Companies in other states hiring me for specialized work. Spencer probably thought I was scraping by on Social Security. He was wrong. This old man still had fight left. By the second year, I'd moved from my kitchen table to a rented office space. Not fancy, just a small room in a strip mall, but it felt like a palace compared to working at home. I hired my first employee, a young programmer named Marcus who reminded me of Spencer before the greed changed him. Eager, talented, hungry to prove himself. "Why'd you start this company, Mr. Guerrero?" Marcus asked one day as we worked late on a project. I considered the question carefully, because I learned that the only person you can truly depend on is yourself. From one employee to 5. From small local contracts to regional deals spanning 3 states. From barely covering expenses to genuine profitability. I reinvested everything back into the business. Better equipment, more staff, larger office space. But I also kept careful records of every transaction, every client, every success. The town that had pitted me began to take notice. This scammed old man was running a successful business, making real money, employing local people. But I still played the part of the humble retiree, downplaying my success, deflecting praise, staying under the radar. Spencer remained oblivious to what I was building. In the 3rd year, something unexpected happened. Tech Global Solutions, a major corporation based in the state capital, made me an offer I couldn't refuse. "We want to buy your company, Mr. Guerrero." Their representative said during our meeting. Full acquisition. You'd continue as a consultant, but we'd handle operations, expansion, integration with our existing services. The number they offered made my head spin. Millions. Enough to retire comfortably for the rest of my life. Enough to replace everything Spencer had stolen and more. But I wasn't thinking about retirement. I was thinking about what came next. I accept, I told them, shaking hands on the deal that would transform me from a small business owner into a wealthy man. The acquisition made local news. Local senior builds million-dollar business after losing life savings to scam. The irony wasn't lost on me. Spencer probably saw the headlines. Probably wondered how his foolish father had managed such success. But he never called to congratulate me. Never reached out at all. That silence told me everything I needed to know about his character. It also confirmed what I planned to do with my newfound wealth. I used part of the money carefully, strategically, not for luxury or comfort, but for power. I researched Spencer's employer, Morrison Industries, a mid-sized manufacturing company where he'd worked for 5 years as a sales manager. Morrison Industries was publicly traded, which meant I could buy shares. Lots of shares. Enough shares to have real influence in company decisions. I worked through investment firms, shell companies, intermediaries, nothing that would directly connect the purchases to me. The acquisitions took months, but eventually, I owned enough stock to become the majority shareholder. The company's current leadership had no idea who I was. To them, I was just another investor, represented by lawyers and financial advisors. They scheduled quarterly meetings, sent reports, treated me with the respect that money commands. But I wasn't interested in their respect. I was interested in their power structure, their decision-making process, their employment policies. Most importantly, I was interested in their ability to hire and fire employees. Spencer still had no idea what was coming. He went to work every day, collected his paycheck, probably bragged to his friends about his success, while his father struggled with the aftermath of being scammed. I decided to visit Spencer at work, playing the part of the meek, proud father who wanted to see where his successful son worked. I called his office and spoke to his secretary in my most humble voice. "Hello, dear. This is Spencer's father. I was wondering if I could stop by sometime to see his office. I don't want to bother him, but I've never seen where he works, and I'm just so proud of how well he's doing." She was sweet, probably thinking I was a typical proud parent. "Oh, how wonderful. I'm sure he'd love to show you around. Let me check his schedule." When I arrived at Morrison Industries, Spencer met me in the lobby. His face showed embarrassment, annoyance, barely concealed irritation. "Dad, what are you doing here?" he asked, glancing around to make sure none of his colleagues were watching. "Just wanted to see where you work, son," I said, keeping my voice soft and admiring. "This is such an impressive building." He rolled his eyes. "Don't embarrass me, Dad. These people are important clients and co-workers." He gave me a quick, grudging tour. His cubicle, the break room, the conference rooms where he held meetings. All the while, his body language screamed that he wished I would disappear. I memorized everything. Floor layouts, security procedures, employee hierarchies. Most importantly, I noted which conference room was used for executive meetings. The next phase required delicate timing. I contacted Morrison Industries CEO directly, using my position as majority shareholder to request a special board meeting. "Mr. Morrison," I said during our phone call, "I have some concerns about a company personnel that need to be addressed at the executive level." Charles Morrison was a decent man who'd built the company from the ground up. He respected his investors and took personnel issues seriously. "Of course, Mr. Guerrero. What kind of concerns are we talking about?" "Employee misconduct, potential fraud, issues that could affect the company's reputation and legal standing." That got his attention immediately. In today's business climate, companies couldn't afford to ignore fraud allegations. "I'll schedule an emergency board meeting for next Friday," he said. "Can you provide documentation of these allegations beforehand?" "I'll have everything ready," I assured him. "But I'd prefer to present the evidence in person. This is sensitive." After I hung up, Morrison probably wondered what kind of misconduct his company was dealing with. He had no idea that his majority shareholder was about to fire his own son in front of the entire executive team. "You want to do what?" my lawyer had asked when I first explained the plan. "Fire my own son," I'd replied calmly. "Publicly, legally, permanently. I hired the best private investigator money could buy. Former FBI, impeccable reputation, thorough and discreet. I gave him everything: bank records from before the theft, documentation of Spencer's access to my accounts, timeline of the missing money. "This is your son?" he asked, reviewing the files. "Yes. And you want me to build a criminal case against him? I want you to find the truth. All of it. Every transaction, every lie, every piece of evidence that shows what really happened to my money." He worked for 6 weeks, following paper trails, interviewing bank employees, gathering security footage, building an airtight case. When he finished, the evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showing Spencer's use of my power of attorney to drain accounts. Security camera footage of him at ATMs, making large withdrawals. Signed checks he'd forged. Investment accounts he'd liquidated without authorization. Even more damning, records of his own spending during the same time period. The expensive car he'd bought. The vacation he'd taken. The down payment on a condo. All funded by money he'd stolen from his own father. The investigator had also documented Spencer's lies, recorded conversations where he repeated the online dating scam story, even adding details to make it more convincing. Everything was neatly packaged in a professional report, suitable for presentation to corporate executives or law enforcement. The truth, finally ready for the light. Friday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. I sat in my car outside Morrison Industries, watching employees arrive for work. Spencer pulled into the parking lot at exactly 8:47 a.m., the same time he arrived every day, according to my research. He walked into the building with his usual confident stride, probably looking forward to another ordinary day of work. He had no idea that his life was about to change forever. At 10 a.m., the emergency board meeting convened in the main conference room. I'd arrived early, sitting at the head of the table with my briefcase full of evidence. The executives filed in, looking curious and concerned. Spencer was the last to enter. He walked in laughing with a coworker about something, probably weekend plans or office gossip. Normal conversation stopped when he saw me sitting there. His face went through a rapid series of expressions: confusion, recognition, embarrassment, and finally a dawning sense of alarm. "Dad?" he said, his voice uncertain. "What are you doing here?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I opened my briefcase and removed the investigator's report, the bank records, the printed photographs. "Spencer," I said quietly, "please have a seat. We need to talk." I stood slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. The executives watched with growing tension as I connected my laptop to the conference room's presentation system. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, "I'm here to discuss employee misconduct involving theft, fraud, and corporate reputation risk." The first image appeared on the large screen: security footage of Spencer at an ATM, withdrawing money from my account. Date stamp clearly visible. His face clearly recognizable. Spencer's face went white. "Dad, what is this? What are you doing?" I ignored his question and continued the presentation. Bank records showing systematic theft. Forged documents. Timeline correlations between missing money and Spencer's personal purchases. "Stop," Spencer said, standing up from his chair. "This is insane. You're having some kind of breakdown." I played the audio recording next, Spencer's own voice, recorded by the investigator, telling a coworker, "Yeah, the old man got scammed by some fake online girlfriend. Sent her everything. What a loser, right?" The room was dead silent. Spencer's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "The total amount stolen," I continued matter-of-factly, "was $247,000. My entire life savings, accumulated over 43 years of marriage and work." I clicked to the final slide. "Employee Spencer Guerrero is guilty of elder abuse, financial fraud, and theft. I recommend immediate termination and criminal prosecution." Charles Morrison looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. The other executives stared at Spencer with a mixture of shock and disgust. One of them was already making notes, probably calculating the legal liability and reputation damage. "Spencer," Morrison said, his voice heavy with disappointment, "is this true?" Spencer tried to salvage the situation with the same lies he'd told everyone else. "He's confused. He's old. He got scammed online, and now he's trying to blame me because he's embarrassed." I opened the investigator's report and began reading directly from it. Account numbers, transaction dates, security footage timestamps, forged signature analyses. Everything documented with professional precision. The evidence is overwhelming, I said. Your employee systematically stole from his own father, then created false stories to cover up his crimes. Morrison looked at Spencer, then at me, then at the evidence displayed on the screen. His decision was swift and final. Spencer, you're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. Clear out your desk under supervision. Your final paycheck will be held pending investigation. Spencer turned to me with desperation in his eyes. Dad, please, we can work this out. Let me explain. It's not what you think. I looked at him calmly. It's exactly what I think. You stole my money and laughed about it. Security appeared at the conference room door. The walk of shame was everything I'd imagined it would be. 2 security guards flanked Spencer as they escorted him through the office, past his co-workers' desks, past the reception area where his secretary watched in shock. Spencer tried to maintain some dignity, but his face was red with humiliation. Employees whispered as he passed. Some looked confused, others sympathetic, a few clearly enjoying the office drama. Dad, please, he said one more time as we reached the elevator. Let me explain. There are things you don't understand. I studied his face, the same face I'd held as a baby, taught to ride a bicycle, cheered at graduation. Now I saw only a stranger who happened to share my DNA. I understand perfectly, I said. You took everything your mother and I worked for. You laughed at my pain. You destroyed my reputation with lies. The only thing I don't understand is how I raised such a person. The elevator doors opened. Security stepped inside with Spencer. This isn't over, he called out as the doors began closing. But his voice sounded hollow, defeated. He knew it was very much over. I watched the numbers descend. 5th floor, 4th floor, 3rd floor, carrying my son out of his career and into the consequences of his choices. Morrison appeared beside me. I'm sorry you had to go through this, Mr. Guerrero. If there's anything we can do, just make sure he doesn't get a reference, I said quietly. I didn't go home after leaving Morrison Industries. Instead, I drove straight to the police station and walked into the detective division with my briefcase full of evidence. I need to report a theft, I told the desk sergeant. Elder financial abuse. I have complete documentation. Detective Martinez was assigned to the case. She listened carefully as I explained the situation, reviewed the investigator's report, examined the bank records and security footage. This is very thorough, she said, impressed by the professional quality of the evidence. Most elder abuse cases don't have this level of documentation. I wanted to make sure there were no questions about what happened, I replied. Within 3 hours, Detective Martinez had obtained a warrant. The investigation moved with surprising speed. When the evidence is overwhelming, law enforcement can act quickly. I was in my living room that evening when I heard the sirens. Through my front window, I watched 3 police cars and a SWAT van race down the street towards Spencer's neighborhood. My phone rang 20 minutes later. Mr. Guerrero? This is Detective Martinez. We've executed the warrant and arrested your son. He's being charged with elder abuse, theft over $200,000, and fraud. He'll be arraigned Monday morning. I thanked her and hung up, then sat quietly in Mabel's chair, looking at her photograph. Justice, not revenge. The arrest made front-page news in our small-town paper. Local man arrested for stealing father's life savings. The story included details about the false online dating narrative, the business success I'd built afterward, and the dramatic boardroom confrontation. Suddenly, the whispers changed. People who had pitted me now looked at me with respect. The foolish old man had become the determined father who'd refused to let his son's betrayal define him. Mrs. Olivia stopped me at the grocery store. Henry, I had no idea. We all believed. We thought you'd been scammed. I'm so sorry. My barber shook her head in amazement. You played the long game, didn't you? Built a whole business just to get justice. Even my old work friends called to apologize for believing Spencer's lies. We should have known better, one said. You were always the smartest guy in our department. The town that had whispered about my foolishness now buzzed with admiration for my patience and planning. But their opinions didn't matter to me anymore. I'd learned to stop caring what other people thought. What mattered was that the truth was finally public. Spencer's lies had been exposed. The real story was known, and my son was facing the consequences of his choices. The trial was swift and decisive. Spencer's lawyer tried to paint him as a desperate son helping his confused father, but the evidence was too strong. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. 3 years in state prison. Full restitution ordered, though we both knew he didn't have the money to pay it back. I attended every day of the trial, sitting in the front row, watching Spencer learn what justice looked like. He kept glancing at me, perhaps hoping for some sign that I might forgive him, help him, save him one more time. I sat in silence, letting him face his consequences alone. The day before he was transferred to prison, Spencer was allowed one visitor. I drove to the county jail, signed the visitor log, and sat across from my son in the small room where inmates met with family. He looked smaller somehow, wearing the orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed to the table. The smirk was gone. The arrogance had evaporated. "Dad," he said, his voice breaking, "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry." I looked at him for a long moment, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time in years. "I know you are, Spencer. But sorry doesn't give me back the 43 years it took to save that money." He wept then, deep sobs that shook his shoulders. 3 years passed quietly. I expanded my business interests, acquired 2 more companies, established myself as a respected figure in the regional business community. The money Spencer had stolen was replaced tenfold through my own efforts. I never visited him in prison after that first time. Never wrote letters. Never sent money for commissary items. He needed to learn that actions have consequences, and consequences can't be avoided with apologies or manipulation. The day of his release, I was waiting in the prison parking lot. Spencer emerged thinner, quieter, older-looking than his 29 years. No smirk, no swagger, just a man carrying a small bag of possessions and 3 years of hard lessons. He saw my car and approached slowly, uncertain whether I was there to help or simply observe his humiliation. "Dad?" he said through the passenger window. I unlocked the door. "Get in." We drove in silence for several miles before he spoke again. "I was wrong," he said, staring out the side window. "About everything. The money, the lies, the way I treated you. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." This apology felt different, deeper, born from genuine remorse rather than desperate self-interest. "I know," I said. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" He turned to look at me, hope flickering in his eyes. I owned another company by then, Guerrero Solutions, a larger consulting firm that specialized in helping businesses modernize their operations. Real offices, 40 employees, multi-million-dollar contracts. "You want to work?" I asked Spencer as we sat in my corporate office. "You start at the bottom. Entry level. Minimum wage. No favors because you're my son." He nodded eagerly. "Yes, sir. Whatever you think is appropriate. You'll work in the warehouse. Loading trucks, organizing inventory, basic manual labor. If you prove yourself reliable for 6 months, we'll talk about other opportunities." The contrast wasn't lost on either of us. 3 years ago, he'd been a sales manager at Morrison Industries, wearing suits and making deals. Now he was accepting a warehouse job from the father he'd robbed. "I understand," he said quietly. "Thank you for giving me a chance." "I'm not giving you anything," I corrected. "You'll learn everything from now on. Respect, advancement, trust, all of it has to be earned." He started the next Monday. I watched through security cameras as he clocked in, put on work clothes, and began learning how to operate a forklift. His supervisor, Marcus, the same young programmer I'd hired years earlier, had no idea Spencer was the owner's son. Spencer never mentioned the connection, never asked for special treatment. He just worked. Over the following months, I watched Spencer transform. The entitled young man who'd mocked his father's pain was replaced by someone who understood the value of honest work. He arrived early, stayed late, volunteered for overtime. His supervisors praised his work ethic. His co-workers respected his attitude. He wasn't trying to impress me. He was trying to rebuild himself. After 6 months, I promoted him to inventory management. After a year, customer service. He worked his way up slowly, earning each promotion through competence and dedication rather than family connections. The other employees eventually learned he was my son, but by then he'd proven his worth independently. Nobody resented his presence or assumed he was getting special treatment. During this time, Spencer also started attending counseling sessions, Gamblers Anonymous meetings, financial responsibility classes. He was addressing the underlying issues that had led to his theft, not just serving time for the consequences. "How's he doing?" Mabel's sister asked me one day. She'd maintained contact with Spencer throughout his imprisonment and recovery. "He's becoming the man I hoped he'd be when he was born," I replied. It was true. For the first time in years, I was proud of my son. 2 years after his release from prison, Spencer came to my office with news that surprised me. "Dad, I'm getting married," he said, nervous but excited. "Her name is Rebecca. She knows everything about the prison, the theft, what I did to you." I told her the whole truth because I never want to lie to anyone again. I studied his face, looking for signs of the old Spencer, the manipulator, the schemer, the person who laughed at other people's pain. I found none of those things. "I want you to meet her," he continued. "And if you approve, I'd like to ask you to walk me down the aisle. I know I don't deserve it, but you're the only father I have." The wedding was small but beautiful. Rebecca was a good woman, kind, intelligent, strong enough to see past Spencer's mistakes to the man he'd become. She worked as a nurse and had her own understanding of redemption and second chances. I stood beside my son as he made vows to love, honor, and cherish his bride. The same vows I'd made to Mabel 45 years earlier. Watching Spencer promise to be faithful and honest, I finally believed he meant it. During his speech at the reception, Spencer did something I hadn't expected. He thanked me publicly, not just for giving him a job, but for teaching him that love sometimes means letting people face their consequences. "My father could have bailed me out," he told the assembled guests. "Instead, he saved me by refusing to enable my destruction. That took more courage than I understood at the time." Now I sit on my front porch most evenings, coffee in hand, watching my grandchildren play in the yard. Spencer and Rebecca have 2 kids, a daughter named Mabel, after her great-grandmother, and a son they call Henry Jr. Spencer lives modestly but comfortably. He's worked his way up to regional manager at Guerrero Solutions, earning every promotion through merit. He's never asked me for money, never expects special treatment, never takes our rebuilt relationship for granted. Sometimes the children ask me to tell stories about their daddy when he was young. I tell them about the good times, birthday parties, fishing trips, bedtime stories. I don't mention the dark years. They'll learn about consequences and choices through their own experiences, guided by parents who understand both. Spencer laughs with his children the way he used to laugh as a boy, genuine joy instead of cruel mockery. Rebecca brings me fresh flowers from their garden. Little Mabel climbs on my lap and asks me to read her stories. I look at this scene and smile, remembering the broken man who sat in this same chair 7 years ago, holding his late wife's photograph and swearing an oath of justice. I didn't just win against my son's betrayal. I didn't just recover my stolen money or restore my reputation. I saved him. And in doing so, I saved our family's future. That may be the best revenge of all. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video, comment, and smash the subscribe button. Also check out other videos on the channel. Joe's got more interesting stories for you.